Reptilians, welcome and welcome back to the channel. I'm Elle, and this is Elle's Reptiles. This week we are doing a video about how to tell whether your reptile is a male or a female. We're just going to go over some of the most popular pets. We're going to look at bearded dragons, leopard geckos, crested geckos, and ball pythons. I just want to preface this by saying that I am not a breeder, so I am certainly not an expert at this. But this is a question that I get a lot in my inbox, just pictures and people saying, is this a male or a female? So I'm going to just show you my animals, show you some graphs and pictures of what the different animals look like. I'm going to show you how to do it, but just know that I am personally not an expert in doing this. You're probably going to hear dogs in the background, and if you do, I am so sorry. Before we get started, this video is sponsored by Gecko, so make sure to stay until the end of the video to find out all about this awesome company. Let's get started. I don't plan to breed my animals, so why do I need to know if I have a male or a female reptile? The biggest reason is because, of course, females are going to lay eggs and males are not. So you need to know if you have a male or a female, so that way if you do have a female, you can set them up a digging area so they can safely and comfortably lay those eggs, because we don't want our animals to not have a place to lay those eggs and become egg bound. Another difference is size differences. Some animals, like when we start talking about the snakes, are going to get significantly bigger as a male versus a female, and so that might be something that you need to take into consideration. And sometimes there are color differences as well. Usually it's not a crazy amount of color differences. And also just keep in mind that age is important. Depending on what kind of animal we're talking about, you're going to want to check on these things at certain times throughout their life, and we will talk about those times at each animal's section. If you came here for a very specific animal, there's channel markers there and in the description, so you can kind of skip around if you need to. First up is the beardy. So the way that we are going to check this animal is by gently lifting up their tail. You're going to kind of pull it gently towards their head to where you can see the underside of that tail. Do not apply pressure. We do not want to injure this animal. Male reptiles are going to have hemipenes, and that is going to be noticeable in the form of two bulges under that tail. The females will just either have one small bulge in the middle, or it'll just be smooth. If you are having a hard time trying to figure out if they have bulges or not, and it can be pretty difficult sometimes, use a flashlight and shine the flashlight at the base of that tail and look for the shadows. If there are two vertical shadows there, that is going to be the male. If there's just one shadow in the middle, that is a female. You want your bearded dragon to be at least 8 to 12 weeks old to do this, and it's sometimes better to wait longer than that as well, just because you need your animal to be comfortable with handling before you do this. If you just brought your animal home and they are squirming and they don't want to be picked up and you're trying to do this, you could seriously injure them, because they're going to try to whip that tail around. If you have an adult bearded dragon and you're trying to check and you are having a hard time with the tail situation, if you look at the underside of your bearded dragon, if that bearded dragon is a male, they will have very noticeable pores that span between their back legs. These pores are also on females, but they're not as big and noticeable on females. And one way that people often try to tell if their bearded dragons are males versus females is the size. Size can kind of indicate whether you have a male or female. Generally, a healthy, well taken care of male will be a bit bigger than a healthy, well taken care of female. Their heads will be a bit bigger. However, you could have just a genetically smaller male. You could have two animals that have been taken care of differently. There's a lot of factors there, so size isn't the most reliable thing to look at. The other ones are much more reliable, super fast, super easy methods. Next up, leopard geckos. For leopard geckos, much like bearded dragons, you're going to look for that hemipenal bulge that is at the base of their tail, under their bodies. It's actually easier with leopard geckos though than bearded dragons, because you can just pick them up and just look. A female's tail pattern underneath will just kind of keep going into her vent, where a male will have a bulge at the base of that tail and then the pattern will kind of go. Or just have them stand up and look at the base of their tail. A male is going to have a bulge there, a female is going to be more flat. Or like with the bearded dragons, you can wait until they get older. You want to wait until they are at least 6 to 10 months old and at least 6 inches long, and then you are going to be able to look under their bodies again and look for those pores, just like we talked about with bearded dragons. The super cool thing about leopard geckos is whether that leopard gecko is a male or a female can greatly depend on what temperature that leopard gecko is incubated at. This means that if you are getting your leopard gecko from a reliable breeder, many times they are actually able to let you know as soon as you get them if it's a male or a female. Again, every single breeder isn't going to be able to tell you this, some breeders are going to incubate those eggs at like a baseline temperature, so they're getting just a random assortment of males and females. Just keep that in mind. Super cool thing about leopard geckos. Next up, we have crested geckos. Again, you're going to look for that hemipenal bulge. With crested geckos, the males are going to have a much more pronounced bulge than the females do. That bulge is also much more noticeable than it is on any of these other animals. It's very obvious if you have a male most of the time. When maturity happens and you are looking for that bulge, males will also have that line of femoral pores. A couple of myths to go ahead and put out there. It used to be said that only the males had the cloacal spurs. Females can have those too, so that is not a reliable way to check male versus female. And males do tend to be a bit larger with a bit larger heads. The breeding, genetics, the care, all of that matters, so it's not a very good, reliable way to check male or female, but it exists. Next up, we have ball pythons. The easiest way to check if your ball python is a male or a female is wait until they're an adult. And there are very obvious size differences between male and female ball pythons. Female ball pythons get larger than their male counterparts. If you have a ball python that is on the very edge of that possible length scale, they are maxed out in length, it's probably going to be a female. Again, other factors go into it like we've already discussed. The other ways to check male versus female ball pythons is by doing a method called popping. This is basically a method where you are grabbing the vent right below the vent with your thumb of that ball python, and you are then taking its tail and you're kind of just gently rolling towards the vent to see if they have hemipenes. This is a method that's going to be much more successful in juvenile ball pythons as opposed to adults, because adult males can kind of just fight back and hold those in. It could be a situation where you think that it is a female, but actually it was just a male that is real strong. Make sure if you're going to do this that number one, it's something that you're comfortable with. Number two, your snake isn't whipping around and going crazy, because incorrectly doing this could potentially injure your ball python's tail. You could hurt that animal. If you're squeezing, you could hurt their insides. Make sure that if you're going to do this, you do a whole bunch of research about how to do it. You make sure that your animal is comfortable being handled, and you are super careful. You should not be applying a lot of force if you're going to do this. And the last one I'm going to mention, but we're not really going to talk much about it, and it's probing. Probing is something that you do not do unless you know what you are doing. This method involves taking a probing kit and actually pushing it in gently, very gently pushing it into the animal's vent to measure the distance in there, and that tells you if it's a male or a female. This is something that can definitely injure your animal if you don't know what you're doing. You are literally sticking a metal tool into their body. Please don't do this if you don't know what you're doing. If you're not comfortable doing these things, that is perfectly understandable. Take them to the vet. Reptile vets are going to be trained to use probing tools or to just be able to do the popping method. They're going to be trained to do those things so that they don't hurt your animal. Or if you happen to know a breeder, take it to them and let them check for you. Just don't do something that you're not comfortable with, because that is how the animal could potentially become injured. But that is all that I have for this video. Hopefully it was helpful, and hopefully you now know if you have a male or a female reptile. And if it is not time for you to check, if your animal is still a tiny little baby, hopefully this video can help you out in the future. As I said at the beginning of this video is sponsored by iHeartGeckos. iHeartGeckos is an awesome company that makes conversion kits for tanks, an old tank that you may have laying around, or one that you get for super cheap, or whatever. And they allow you to make very inexpensive front opening tanks for animals. They're awesome. This tank right here is doing fantastic. Hundreds of little babies going on under here. Ventilation is wonderful. The plants do wonderful. And this thing lasts, I've had it set up for quite a long time, and it's doing great. Make sure if you do happen to order one of these from this wonderful company, you put Elle's Reptiles in the How Did You Hear About Us box. That way they know that you guys are coming from here. Thank you so much to iHeartGeckos for sponsoring this video. As always, if you have not already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials, like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I put out a video, which is every Sunday and some Wednesdays. This week's Instagram shoutout is here, and this week's subscriber shoutout is here. Thank you guys both so much for liking and subscribing and following and sharing and commenting and all of those things. You are the bee's knees. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. Is it working? All right. You're just gonna hear dogs in the background, I'm so sorry. Geckos. The leopard geckos, much like bearded dragons, you are going for leopard geckos, much like bearded dragons, you're going to search for that and for leopard, and some are going to well, the next day I'm gonna be just the coolest.